Afternoon once again. You can all hear us down the back, I hope. Can you all hear us down? That's great, marvellous altogether. It is the 23rd of June. It's amazing how quickly this wonderful day comes round again. And we're here. This is our 10th annual gathering in the Folly. We did have to move indoors once out of the rain, but the less said about that, the better, because generally the gods smile on us. Not so much the gods, I think, but there's 854 souls that smile upon us on a June Sunday in the sunshine. And we come to remember them this afternoon. This idea began, like many good ideas begin, in drink. Myself and Martin Parfrey, and I think Tom might have been there too, one or two others, were sitting down one night thinking, was there something that we could do? And we had all visited this lovely place with its sad history, this Folly. And we said, wouldn't it be great if we could remember the women and children down there in Bessborough? Don't do it anywhere, just try and do it in Bessborough. And the first conversation was, would they let us in? Remarkably, they did. And now I'm happy to say that the committee enjoys quite a healthy working relationship with the people here. We just tell them when we want to do it. And they put things in place for us, which is marvellous. I want to think for a minute about that number. That number, okay? 954. I remember seeing that number when it was first published and thinking, that's nearly 1,000 people. Unaccounted for. Unaccounted for, no sign of them. Except maybe later we'll hear from Daniel about some work that he's been doing. But that's 19 women completely unaccounted for. And hundreds of children. Unaccounted for. Nobody knows where they are. What happened to them? Where were they put? Are we sitting above them? And it got me thinking, it's a question going around my mind. Every Saturday afternoon for the last 8 or 9 months, there's a protest in the city centre of Cork City, and indeed Limerick and Galway, Dublin, against and calling for an end to the atrocities of Gaza. And rightly so. It must stop. Yesterday afternoon, hundreds of people gathered in Cork, Dublin, Waterford, Limerick, in support of and in recognition of a young lady called Natasha O'Brien, who I'll have the honour of interviewing on my radio show in the morning, about what she has been put through. And rightly so. I ask a question this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not asking anybody to start it. The 954, where's their protest march? Where's theirs? I've never seen one, have you? And I just ask people to think about that this afternoon. It's my honour and privilege to be here once again to take you through what will be about an hour. We'll be done within the hour, and you can go off and enjoy the sunshine, and there'll be some bites afterwards in the Blackrock Inn for you. But we have musical accompaniment, as we always do, and I'm delighted to welcome one of Cork's finest singer-songwriters and one of Cork's hardest working postmen. I commented to him, yes, you've lost a bit of weight since I saw you last. He said, is it any wonder when you walk 15 kilometres a day, when you put it like that? Ladies and gentlemen, to take us through the afternoon musically, Mr. Miles Gaffney. Thank you.
The moment they slammed the door upon my admission, my dignity, identity, they stole my only possession. In their eyes burned Satan's flame. You're the shame, you've yourself to blame. Mother Superior deemed from afraid, as they christened me my fictitious name. Welcome to your hell on earth, for the fall members of the church. We are nothing, you are only dirt, and we'll sell your baby when you give birth. So I beg Jesus and Mary, would you let me keep my baby? Can I have him back if I keep going to mass? Isn't this what you told me? As I scrub down on my hands and knees, and you stripped my flesh with your rosary beads, with the blind eyes of the powers to be. What a price to pay for a pregnancy. Infants screaming in distress, snatched straight from their mother's breast. The masquerading brides of Christ, on their newborn wrists they slapped the price. Some little angels were insane, their mothers were kept as slaves, and nobody knows their names. They're buried in shallow graves, suffer in silence, not even a whisper. Never forget your demonic sisters. Always remember you're the sinner as you cut the grass with your paper scissors. So I beg Jesus and Mary, would you let me keep my baby? Can I have him back if I keep going to mass? Isn't this what you told me? As I scrub down on my hands and knees, and you stripped my flesh with your rosary beads, with the blind eyes of the power to be. What a price to pay for a pregnancy. Still the stench of evil seeps from the walls. Babies crying, stay home, home. Stay home, home.
Thank you, Miles. I have to say, I've never heard that song before. Anyone else heard that song before? I think that's the best opening song we've ever had at this wonderful event here in the Folly. Thank you so much, Miles, for opening with that. Just some housekeeping, so to speak. I mentioned this before we began. To mention it again leaves it a little bit late, but if you do need to use a toilet, it's a bit of a trek away, but we do have one. Just as you head towards the gate, you'll see fencing on your right-hand side. You need to go in behind that fence. There's a little cabin there, and there's a toilet in it. Give yourself time. As you do leave later, there are many buildings here, and it's the natural thing to be drawn to take a look in. I would have to ask you on behalf of the organisers, please don't, because there are different purposes on the buildings today, and there are service users and indeed vulnerable service users inside those windows, inside those walls. So please don't. It would be appreciated if you didn't look in the window, particularly if you didn't attempt to take photographs. And also, speaking of photographs, there is, as you may have seen, a film crew here. A documentary is being made. And anyone who doesn't want to be on film, just stay out of the way of the camera, and they'll take care of the rest. I mentioned that 10 years ago there was a discussion, should we do something? And one of the first people to put her hand up and say, I'll help with that, I'll be part of that, is a woman with her own story to tell regarding Bessborough and what happened to her own brother. And every year she gives out to me for saying that it wouldn't happen without her, but it wouldn't. It's as simple as that, ladies and gentlemen. Carmel Cantwell.
I would like to welcome everyone here to our 10th annual Bessborough Commemoration, including the public representatives present here today, whose support is greatly appreciated. A special thanks to our guest speakers, the Special Advocate for Survivors Patricia Carey, the outgoing Lord Mayor Councillor Kieran McCarthy, and our MC PJ Coogan, who's had his support from the beginning. My gratitude also to my colleagues Christy Kerwin, Martin Parfrey for your support and hard work, and to Daniel Loftus, who typed up all the names of the lists of deaths which you can see on the side of the folly here, and who is working tirelessly with his volunteers to find the missing names of those that died. Finally, our sincere thanks to the renowned musician and singer Miles Gaffney, who's performing here today, as you can see. Bessborough is a very special place to us, especially here around the folly, which has become the de facto memorial headstone to all the mothers and children that died, and even more so as the burial place of 859 babies is still unknown. This is a place where we come together and remember all those that were born here that died and those who were separated from their mothers. 923 Bessborough children and 31 women are entered into the death register. If they were given proper medical care, we believe many could have been saved. It was only when the Chief Medical Officer James Deaney intervened in 1945 that the death rate came down in subsequent years. Prior to his intervention, death rate was horrendous. In 1943, 3 out of 4 babies died in Bessborough. My brother was born in Bessborough in 1960, and 3 days after his birth he became seriously ill with an infection that could have been treated with antibiotics. However, despite my mother begging the nuns to have her baby seen and treated by a doctor, her pleas were ignored for 2 weeks, until such time as William became so ill he was finally transferred to St Finbarr's Hospital, but the medical intervention there came far too late and he died. The Mother and Baby Home Commissioner of Investigation reports describes William as an unclaimed baby, but my mother, who is present here today, did everything she could to try to get help for her baby, to no avail. She had no say when she was in Bessborough, and she was not even informed initially when William died or where he was buried. She was just coldly told that her baby was dead and already buried, with no further details forthcoming from the nuns. My mother returned to Bessborough in '94 looking for information on where William was buried, and the nun she met showed her the spot in the nuns' graveyard here, and the nun said William was buried there. This was another blatant lie, as documentary proof obtained by the Mother and Baby Home Commission of Investigation confirmed in 2019 that he was actually buried in Cars Hill Cemetery and not Bessborough, but the exact location of his grave in Cars Hill could not be determined. The documentary evidence of William's burial place was already in the possession of the nuns when my mum came to Bessborough in '94 to beg them to let her know where her child was buried so that she could visit his grave, but they still insisted that William was buried in Bessborough, which they knew was not true. How could they be so cruel and disrespectful? The fact is that the majority of babies that died in Bessborough did not get a dignified burial with their mothers present. It is thought that hundreds of children may be buried on the grounds here, but another year has gone without any decision made by On Board Panola regarding 2 separate planning applications for housing developments on the land around us. This land should never have been sold to the nuns to developers, and instead should have been given back to the community and preserved in the memory of nearly 19,000 women and children that came through this horrendous institution, where so many perfectly able mothers were separated from their children for life against their will. In particular, I would like to remember 2 mothers, Julia and Annie, that spent their whole adult lives here. Julia was from Macroom, who worked as a domestic servant at age 20 in 1922. She gave birth to her daughter in Cork County Home. Later that year, she was transferred to the newly acquired Sacred Heart Home here at Bessborough, and Julia's daughter was 5 years old when she was boarded out to a family and then adopted age 12. Julia herself remained in Bessborough for 62 years, and she died in 1984. Annie was a 21-year-old from East Cork and also a domestic servant. She gave birth to her son John in the Youghal Union workhouse and transferred via the county home to Bessborough in January 1925. Baby John died 13 days later. Cause of death was general debility. Annie also never left Bessborough and remained here for 60 years. She died in Bessborough in 1985. You will find details of those that died on the boards at the side of the folly. Of the 923 children that died, the burial place of only 64 is on record, and even then in many cases the actual location of the graves in the cemetery is unknown. The burial place of 859 children is unknown, and we have been campaigning for years for the grounds of Bessborough to be thoroughly examined so that we can determine the truth. Whilst the government have provided funding for other institutions like Tuam and Sean Ross Abbey to be forensically examined, the whereabouts of the remains of the missing Bessborough babies has been left to the theories and speculation of others. This is not good enough. Our belief is that everything that can be done should be done to get justice for the missing babies and mothers and their families, and after all the investigations have been concluded, irrespective of whether we find a mass burial site or not, the grounds at Bessborough should be preserved in their memory and for the surviving family members and the community in general. We want the children to have their narrative told and to give those that died the dignity that they deserve but were denied. To that end, we wish to be included in all discussions held by local authority and ministers in government about plans for Bessborough, and to be involved in sincere discussions about how we can best honour them today. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmel. And with regard to the proposed development work and anything that might happen, I have said, and I continue to say, the one thing I have is a voice. And as long as I have that voice, I will speak out about one shovel brought onto these grounds. Not on my watch, ladies and gentlemen, not on my watch. Our next speaker, I mentioned that number, that big number. It's going down, just little by little by little. And it's going down thanks to an extraordinary project that I first heard about on radio a couple of years ago, and then he came here and told us about it. It's called Project Infant. It's the most wonderful idea. I'm going to find them. Daniel Loftus.
Thank you, and obviously if you were here last year you would have heard me speak about what Project Infant is, but in a short 2-line phrase, it would be the database to remember every child that died, along with every mother that died, in a mother and baby home around Ireland. Although in more recent times it's expanding to more different institutions to include them as well. But earlier this year, Carmel asked me to try and take this on because when the Irish Examiner published their front page in January 2021 of their 816 names that were known and that had been found by journalist Donald O'Keefe and published, I wanted to try and add to that. And since March, me and 5 volunteers with Project Infant have found a total of 27 children and 2 mothers, 2 of which you would have heard in Carmel's opening address. So I would just like to take a minute to read their names out to formally acknowledge them so that people may know their names. John O'Brien, Patrick McCarthy, Philomena O'Brien, Patrick Lenan, Lawrence O'Toole, Bridget O'Keefe, Michael Shea, Mary Buckley, Timothy Jerome Clune, Mary Murray, Johanna Madigan, Christina White, William Francis McInerney, Michael Ryan, Patrick Joseph Hickey, Michael Noel Murphy, Michael Lucy, Raymond Mulcahy, Joseph O'Driscoll, Anthony O'Sullivan, Anne Philomena Thompson, Declan Joseph O'Sullivan, Aidan Francis McCarthy, John Murphy, Marie Casey, Ida O'Driscoll, Dermot M. Leggett, and two mothers, Julia O'Donoghue and Anne Walsh. That brings the total of known names up to 845, and we will keep searching for the remaining names until we find them. And one additional thing I'd like to ask is that we have 1 minute of silence to remember the women and children that had died, including our good friend Patrick Kidney, who recently passed away. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Daniel. And Project Infant, just search it and you'll find all the wonderful work that is being done. Our next speaker is one of our two guest speakers this afternoon. And over the years here, we've had some surprises. Some people have come to attend from the four corners of the world. It's been wonderful to see them. I'm thinking of one woman who has come just locally now, who, if I'm allowed to say it, Una will soon be celebrating her 95th birthday, ladies and gentlemen, here in the front row. Una spent time here. But our next speaker came to us a number of years ago. If I remember correctly, it was in her capacity at the time as the chair of the Adoption Authority. And she spoke here, where I'm standing, for a good 5 or 10 minutes. And at the end of it, she revealed something that none of us knew. None of us knew. She revealed that she herself was a Bessborough baby. Ladies and gentlemen, Patricia Carey.
Thanks very much, PJ, and it's lovely to be back here. Now I can say it's my third time to be in Bessborough, and as I drove up the long and quite ominous drive, I tried to imagine what it was like for those mothers and many of you here today. And I know I felt my stomach turn a little bit, so I can only imagine the fear, the terrible anticipation, the wonder, where am I? I've spoken to women who didn't know where they were, and I know some of you are here today. And many of the mothers, most of them left without their children that were taken from them forcibly. So I want really to acknowledge the mothers that are here, and as Daniel said, the children who never left. I want to thank Carmel and Martin and all my friends from Cork over the years for inviting me here. In my new role as Special Advocate for Survivors in the last 3 months, it's only 3 months since I started, about 400 survivors have contacted me. And I want to talk about the issues and the concerns that are coming up time and time again. The first one is that survivors are again excluded. They are excluded from what is called a payment scheme, and I think that word is reprehensible. It is redress, and 24,000 children who are born in mother and baby homes are excluded. This is not a payment scheme. You get paid for something you do. This is redress for what happened to people, and I think we need to acknowledge that. It's not payment, it's redress. Anyone who suggests that only 2 mother and baby homes in Ireland had work going on in them is frankly, I don't know what planet they're living on. How anyone could suggest that of the mother and baby homes that work only took place, that nappies were washed and floors were scrubbed in 2. And that's what this scheme says, and we must challenge it. How anyone could say that somebody who spent less than 6 months in an institution cannot or has not suffered trauma really needs their head examined, to be quite honest. And how anyone could suggest that an arbitrary list of county homes and a small number of baby homes were the institutions where people were incarcerated and abused is frankly wrong. There are over 200, probably 300-400, and I know that thanks to people like Catherine O'Donnell, more research is going on to find these institutions. Also to mention the thousands of children who are boarded out, and I know they were mentioned here, completely excluded, completely unmentioned. Children as young as 4 and 5 and 6 who were sent as strangers to people's houses to live in barns, to pick potatoes. I met a woman recently who was 16 when somebody said, "It's your birthday." And she said, "What is a birthday?" She had never had one. All of these exclusions you know so well, and all of these exclusions must be challenged. And I think that with partners and supporters like the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission and other institutions, we will challenge these exclusions from the incarceration in the institutions. Survivors have told me that they're sick and tired of being over-consulted and under-delivered. They're sick of surveys, they're sick of meetings, they're sick of all these things where the government says, "Come and talk to us," and nothing happens. And actually, worse than nothing happens, the recommendations of those affected people have been ignored. And they've been ignored for decades. And it's wonderful to see so many people here today, but we must unite our voices and say this is not good enough. As PJ said, we're marching to end war. We're marching for that young woman who was terribly attacked in the street. Why are we not marching for the missing and dead children and women of Ireland? In 2021, the Taoiseach made yet another apology for mother and baby institutions, and I think many of you here today know how hollow apologies ring when they're not followed up by action. He said, and I quote, "Each of you deserved so much better. Each of you deserves so much better." So why, we ask again and again, are we not receiving so much better? Why, as Carmel said, are certain institutions pitted against others? We know that there's work going on in Tuam, there was certain work in Sean Ross Abbey. Each exclusion further diminishes this apology. It diminishes all apologies that were given to mothers, to the babies born, to the babies that died, and the women and children whose lives were ruined. Bessborough in particular had the highest infant mortality rate. And I was interested to hear Carmel's reference to James Deany. And I know when the Chief Medical Officer came here, some things changed, but many things didn't. Children still died. Women still had babies with no medical nurse intervention. And finally, survivors tell me they want to tell their stories, they want to be heard. They want to unravel what happened. They want the world to listen. And in order to do this, I think two fundamental things have to happen. We must receive all of the records, all of the religious institutions, all of the private individuals, all of the people who have boxes in their attics, photographs. They must now give them, because it could be the missing piece of a jigsaw for thousands of people. Religious orders have no right to hold on to these records. None whatsoever. They must be handed over to the correct authorities so we can write the history of affected people in Ireland. And the second thing is we must teach the history. Young people now, if you say mother and baby institutions, Magdalene laundries, industrial institutions, do they know what we're talking about? I worry in 10 years' time our history will be forgotten. Stop talking about the 1916 Rising. Talk about the institutional abuse that took place in Ireland for centuries. In conclusion, as we walk back down the long drive of Bessborough, if we remember each other and unite together, we can make change. We can do it together. We've done it before, the work that was done with the Magdalene women. And I believe the power of Carmel's voice and all your voices that are coming here together. In conclusion, I want to finish with a poem by another affected person, a survivor called Connie Roberts, who grew up in multiple institutions. And this, I suppose, is really for Carmel's mum and all the mums here. It's called Holy Angels. Where the babies slept, mottled white steel cots lined up like infanteries. Soiled nappies steeping in green and red buckets. A young girl bottle feeds a baby and puts him down for the night. Next day, whispers to her friend in school how he never woke up. Thank you.
Special advocate for survivors, Patricia Carey. I think the survivors are in good hands. Thank you very much, Patricia. There's a saying, you know, and I don't quite fall into this category because my connection is through my friends, my great friends in this community, whom I always thought, do you know what? I have more rights than them, and we stand next to each other and we drink at the same counter and we shop in the same shop and we're of the same parish and the same town. We're neighbours, as myself and Martin were for years. And they're different because the state made them different. So that's why I stand here today. And there's a saying in advocacy, you know, given to me many years ago by a great friend of mine called John McCarthy, who was known affectionately as Mad John. Some of you might have known him. He said, nothing about us without us. And when you appoint someone like Patricia Carey to that role, that breaks that barrier in some special way, and I wish Patricia the very, very best of luck in her role. More music. Thank you. Not only did we have that beautiful song to open, but I had a very quiet word with Miles before or after he sang it, and not only did he perform it for us here this afternoon, I have to tell you, he also wrote that song. I was wondering where he found it. So to give us another song, and I think his choices this afternoon are exceptional, because in the hearts of all of the people here and all of the people gone before, there's something inside them. Come on, Miles Gaffney.
Thank you. I suppose I should have explained that song before I sang it. Just to lighten things up a bit. My grandson was christened last night, so the head wasn't really in it for the, you know, we had a good night. So no, so going back in about 2015 maybe, a lady named Joan McDermott. Some of you might know Joan. I don't know if she even here. She asked me to help her with her plight and highlighting the mother and baby home situation and the scandals and so on and so forth. And she said the best way to do it would be through music and song to reach the people. So I went to her home in Middleton and we sat down for about 4 or 5 hours, and that was the outcome of that meeting, was that song. And fast forward to 2017, and that song was actually picked up and nominated for a Grammy Award in America, which was huge, you know. So I just want to thank Joan, if she is here, and if not, for sharing her story with me and allowing me to write that powerful song. The higher you build your barrier, the taller I become. The more that you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can't deny me, you can't decide to turn your face away. No matter, 'cause there's something inside so strong, and I know that I can make it, 'cause you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride is gone, oh no. something inside so strong, something inside so strong. The more you refuse to hear my voice, the louder I will sing. You hide behind the walls of Jericho, way, your lies that come tumbling. In that my place and time, you squandered wealth, it's mine. My light will shine so brightly behind you. Because there is something inside so strong, and I know that I can't make it. Or you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong, something inside so strong. Brothers and sisters, when they insist we're just not good enough, oh, we know better, we just look them in the eyes and we'll say, we're gonna do it anyway, we're gonna do it anyway, we're gonna do it anyway. Cause there is something inside so strong, and I know that I can make it. Cause you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong, something inside so strong, something inside so strong.
Miles, thank you, sir. We'll have another song from Miles before we finish this afternoon. I want to introduce you now to someone who's going to read you a story. And it's a story of an adoptee. Would you welcome, please, Marie Barry.
I don't really have much to comment on this. I think I leave it open to yourselves. There's a lady here who wishes to remain anonymous and wants this story read so that people will hear her and let her live. I was born in Bessborough in the early 70s, adopted by a couple who had requested a baby girl with dark hair and brown eyes. My adoptive father was a loving, kind man who instantly fell in love with me. My adoptive mother never bonded with me. She was cold and unloving, and she drank heavily. I lived in a magnificent, large house, but it never felt like home. My mother was warped and controlling, extremely hard to please. I was placed with my prospective adoption parents when I was 7 weeks old. A social worker visit noted concerns about my care. I had horrendous nappy rash. There was a question of neglect. The formal adoption was delayed. Six months later, it was approved, but my adoptive parents were told not to proceed with their application to adopt another baby. This fact alone should have raised a red flag. The state did no thorough backgrounds checks on prospective adoption parents. My adoptive mother had a mental breakdown when I was a few months old. She was hospitalized, yet no one objected to my formal adoption. The system, and this is the point she really wants to make, the system was deeply flawed, and I suffered as a result. As a toddler, I would be put into a playpen for hours on end. It was a wire cage. There was no mother-daughter playtime. I was an accessory, and an object to complete her family. Every week, my mother and myself went to visit my grandfather. He was a very successful businessman who employed several people. What some would describe, a pillar of the community. He was a moody man from a young age. I was very aware of how my mother behaved differently, almost childlike, when in his company. My grandfather was a paedophile. My mother suffered a horrendous childhood at his hands. As a result of the aggressive abuse, she could not have her own children. I was first abused by him at the age of 8, when we visited my grandfather one summer morning. I had no idea what had happened. All I knew was that my grandfather had inflicted pain on me. I felt dirty and sore. I barely spoke for the rest of the day. I refused to eat my lunch, and my mother became extremely irate with me and threw the remainder of the boiling hot soup at me, inflicting third-degree burns on one of my arms. The mark is still a permanent physical reminder of that day. This abuse continued every week of every month for 4 years. I often struggled and tried to stop him, but he got angry and would punish me for not complying. I have cigarette burns on my legs, inflicted by my grandfather for not willingly participating. The marks I have from the burns were never questioned by my mother, the GP, or even nurses when I was admitted to hospital at the age of 10, even though I was severely underweight. At the age of 12, I became pregnant. I miscarried. I was locked into my bedroom because I had bled on the good carpet. I miscarried alone. I will never forget the fear and pain I endured that day. My mother never spoke to me about that day, never apologized for treating me so cruelly, never wiped away my tears. My mother was complicit in my grandfather's abuse. She knew yet willingly took me with her on those weekly visits to my grandfather. I made my peace with her decades ago. She never came to terms with her own abuse. She suffered mentally. I don't blame her for my childhood. I blame the system for allowing to totally disregard the paramount importance of a child's welfare. The adoptive parents' religious affiliations and financial status were the only concerns of the system. And I think we'd all agree to that. My childhood led to years of mental torture. I used alcohol and drugs to try to drown out my memories. I self-harmed, attempted suicide. I often wonder how different my life would have been if the state had honoured my constitutional rights. The state failed me and so many others. Yet to date, the state has refused to acknowledge this. The effect my childhood abuse had and still has on my life is almost indescribable. I made some dreadful life choices as a result. I've done things I am not proud of. For a period of my teenage years, I was out of control. I am thankful I managed to turn my life around. To this day, I have never had the experience of a full night's unbroken sleep. I am triggered often. Enduring trauma is a life sentence. A fleeting touch on the right-hand side of my body is enough to trigger me. The most upsetting trigger for me is when my dog's paw lightly kicks me on my right side and my whole body shudders. I am re-traumatized. It upsets me most because I adore my animals. They are my family. He was repeatedly sent me into a dark place with vivid, horrendous memories and will no doubt do so on many further occasions. I was recently struck by the fact that I was just unfortunate to be the one who was adopted by my mother. It could have been any dark-haired, brown-eyed baby girl available for adoption who was born a week earlier or later than me. I am glad it was me. I would not wish my childhood on anyone else. I would not wish for any other person to have endured the pain and suffering I went through. I compartmentalize. It's my coping mechanism. I try to detach my adult self from my 8-year-old self. Today I would like to thank Marie, for kindly agreeing to speak on my behalf. I know this is not an easy read or easy to hear, but it is important that my story is heard and that my 8-year-old self is listened to and believed. To my 8-year-old self, you are stronger than you ever know. I love you and will remember you as the little carefree child you were before you were abused. I will not let the abuse taint how you should be remembered. It does not and will not define you. I fought to be the best version of you I could possibly be. I will keep fighting because you are worth so much more than what happened to you. I can only hope I have done you proud. A very sobering story being related here by somebody anonymously who doesn't wish her name to be divulged. Sorry, I left out one here. I struggled for decades to come to terms with my past. It was a long and bumpy road, but I survived. You may wonder why I choose to remain anonymous. My children know nothing about my abuse. A conscious decision I made the day my eldest was born. I did not want to inflict them with harrowing details of my life. I wanted them to grow up with no experience of unhappiness. I battled through my tough days by always striving to give the best of me to my children. I did what was right for me to be the best mother I could manage for them, to be for them. My own comment is I hope that this strong, brave lady who was among us will find solace in the words of the Lebanese poet and philosopher, Khalil Gibran. Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. Thank you very much to this lady. Well, it's a privilege to read this, and I'm sorry I skipped one of the most important paragraphs. Goedemiddag, Margaret.
Wow. Thank you, Marie. And to that person, I'm looking to all the corners of this beautiful place. To you, whoever you are, what can you say to that? Except we hear you. We hear you. And we have your back. That's all we can say. Our next speaker is the immediate outgoing Lord Mayor of Cork. But I want to tell you a little story. See this, if you've never, anyone here the first time? Anyone for the first time? Okay, well, there you are. Okay, cool. Welcome. This is a wonderful place called The Folly. It's where we began to hold our little event here 10 years ago. And we got an alert a few years ago. Someone contacted me and contacted Martin and said, they're pulling it down. And we said, they're doing what exactly? They're pulling it down. And we came down, myself and Martin and others came down to find that indeed they had begun to pull down this structure. Not knowing what was under it, not caring, just pull it down. And of course I came down and I did a news story about it, and we got behind the idea that up with this we shall not put. You can't just start pulling down this structure just because you feel like it. And as you can see, it got reinstated. Many people helped with that. Many people helped with that campaign to have it reinstated. But one of them was, in fact, the immediate past Lord Mayor of Cork, who's also a historian and has become a great friend of this event. Ladies and gentlemen, Kieran McCarthy.
Dear PJ, dear Carmel, dear Daniel, Patricia, dear Miles, dear Deputy Gould and Councillor Gould, and my dear friends. Many thanks for the invitation to speak, Carmel. My dear friends, by trade, I collect stories on Cork's past and Ireland's past. And they say that some stories have the power to stop you. They can stop you in your tracks. Some stories, they kind of impress you. Some stories make you question, make you wonder, make you dream, make you curious, make you disturbed, and make you explore, and to not forget a whole series of emotions. And there are many, many stories in Cork history that have stopped me over the years and made me wonder and made me curious and made me remember, and many stories that are spoken about. And in the City Library, my dear friends, I regularly take down history books from shelves, and I learn about, we'd say, different locales and neighbourhoods. And you can take down a history book in Blackrock, and you can open that book, and you can read about the story of one of the oldest railway lines in the country that passed through here, the third railway line to be built. You can read about the marina and a former wall to keep ships out from a swamp. You can read about Blackrock Pier and a fishing village for 2,000 people. You can read about Ringmahon House and the Murphy family and brewing industry. And you can read about Ballinoor Village and the O'Mahony legacy and why this peninsula is called the Mahon Peninsula. And you can also read about this 19th century folly and its original purpose, and the story of the big house and the Pike family, Bessborough House and their steamship industry. And then you turn the page over for Bessborough, and it's like the ink runs dry. It's like it's the end of the book. And you're kind of going, surely we're only in early 20th century here. Well, what's missing? And my dear friends, the city's memory bubble on Blackrock, if I can use that terminology, does much remembering of bricks and mortars very well. But when you dig down into the social elements and talking about the realities of people's lives, there are vast, vast swathes of voices that are missing. In terms of the city, it's got better in recent years when it comes to oral histories, but the city's memory bubble collection is very, very, very selective and heavily influenced by Ireland's memory bubble, which is also very selective. As a place, Cork, and indeed Ireland, we don't do traumatic history retelling. We don't do turbulent history retelling, dark history retelling, oppressive history retelling, control history retelling, so to speak. And I was going to add, doesn't do very well to such a statement, but we just don't do it. When it comes to traumatic history, it's not in mainstream school curricula, it's not in mainstream oral history, it's not in mainstream Irish history books, it's not in mainstream history conferences for the most part, it's not in mainstream history performances or pageantry or festivals or heritage gatherings. And the recent reports from central government on topics such as the industrial schools and the mother and baby homes, yes, they're an important step, but only one step towards reconciliation of traumatic history and memory in Ireland. And so the importance of the gathering here for the past 10 years should never be underestimated. And it's so crucial for many reasons. This gathering is a beacon or a lighthouse to not only tell the stories of what happened here, to tell the stories of the human experience of what happened, but also lead the calls to break the selectiveness of Cork and Irish history and completing the multitude of memory banks that are only partly explored. Some are forgotten about, some are remembered, but certainly all of them are not put together. It is said that if you don't know your past, we don't know where we're going, or history can repeat itself if we don't learn from the past. But if we don't explore all the past, and if we don't unlock all of the history, then the paths of our future will only be laid out partly. And we won't even learn effectively going forward. Bessborough needs to be a place where the selectiveness of history is broken, and that the woven vines of stories and histories and memory is unwoven and laid out properly, where the questions are answered and more questions asked and more answers given, and not just Cork people learn from this site, but also the rest of Ireland as well. This event today and other impressive voluntary work has been the stay of all those involved with the Bessborough story for not just one decade, but for decades and decades. And in essence, the story here, and I echo the calls of the previous speakers, need to be at least in mainstream school curricula, in mainstream oral history, in mainstream Irish history books, in mainstream history conferences, in mainstream history performances, pageantry and festivals and heritage gatherings. And above all, I share the perspective that this site here in Bessborough needs to be a large-scale commemoration memory site or park. In my head, I'd like to see the whole space as a prominent commemoration site in our city and in our region. And that's my call to on board Clonala. Because it is my hope that in the next 12 months in Clonala, yes, we'll come to a decision. And if the decision is the developer can't build on the land, well, the question is, what next? And so in my head, central government should purchase the site from the developer and then turn it into a commemoration site itself. And my dear friends, yes, to do that as a sincere nod to those whose personal lives are woven to the mother and baby home story, but also as a commemoration lighthouse of the journey, Irish history, and all its nuances still need to travel, where the memorial site here with the folly can be at the heart of it, and where the stones represent the pieces of a puzzle that need to be resolved, and that the folly itself can be a place of discussion, a place of resilience, of hope, of justice, of dignity, of voices, of truth, of survival, and to echo the previous voice, a place of letting people live and a place of the strongest souls. The names of the babies accounted for and unaccounted for need to be in large stones across this commemoration site. Seats, commemoration sculptures, pieces, healing spaces, thought-provoking spaces, history-telling spaces, a space for all to just come and reflect, not just a space in Blackrock or a city space, but a national and European site of reflection. Why should it just be a small site? Let's broaden out to the whole tens of acres of land that we actually have here. And we do need government, local government, of which I'm a part of, and societal intervention for this, and all of this working together. So I hear your call as well, Carmel, in your opening speech. My sincere thanks to all the team again for organising this event for the past 10 years and all the daily work put in. I don't think it's just once a year to put the story, this story for justice here, and try to put on the mainstream Irish history map, so to speak. I remain supportive as a local historian, as a councillor in Cork City Council, and I remain conscious that we all need to gather together even more to work through the history, heritage and memory of not just this particular site, but we've also heard about the other sites across the country and what I call these other precious sites of memory that also need to be unpacked. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kieran. And indeed, Kieran is not unknown for singing a bar of a song now and again, and we'll have him join us on maybe the last number with Miles before we finish out this afternoon. I do have a running order to keep to, so I'll get there if I can. Ladies and gentlemen, would you welcome, please, Breda Murphy. I'm not ignoring you. We have a running order to keep to. Thank you very much.
In the 10 years that I've been working with survivors of mother and baby homes, Magdalen homes, I've heard the most harrowing of stories and received the most harrowing of phone calls. But the story today of a child born here and taken from here as a mail order type of child, they had, according to Marie who read the story, they had a requirement for a child with brown hair and brown eyes, and her life is forever altered. The government, unfortunately, today continue to deny 24,000 of such survivors who were adopted and those boarded out, as we've heard earlier. The poem I have written is called Lost Child, and today as we travelled, we took with us porcelain white bones, which we as survivors have fashioned, have made symbolically to remember the children that are lost here. They're on plates, porcelain plates with the artist Holly Malarkey, and they're around to the side, and they are a gift to the survivors of Bessborough. The poem, Lost Child. The cute baby gurgles broke the morning silence, but there was no one there to hear. The mothers already kneeling at mass, head bowed in morning lauds, solemn in their place of detention, held without trial or validity. Their sin, motherhood of a child born out of wedlock. Their cries for justice echo today in corridors of power, carried in Dáil and Shannon, in cloisters, cathedrals and bishops' palaces, in pharmaceutical giant towers. And still, decades later, justice is delayed, denied, thwarted. But we who speak for them, despite the indifference, will not be deterred. We will not be silent. We are their voice. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now we have another poem. Madeline is next up.
Hello, good to see you all. I had a poem ready, but I can't say it. The poem was called Stolen Child by W.B. Yeats, and he reminded me of our lost children. The children was taken by death or by adoption, forced adoption. I came here in 1960, in August 1960. I was met at Cork Harbour by a man in a dark grey suit. Now you would take him as a funeral director. He drove a large black car, and we drove it. I have never, by then, previously I had escaped to England from Tipperary, where I was born and reared by my grandmother and grandfather. And I escaped, I got a job in Golders Green in London with a lovely Jewish family. But they didn't know I was pregnant, and I was desperate. I was about 4 months then, and I was desperate. I could see myself increasing in the mirror. So what I did was go to the local Catholic church to confess. I confessed to the priest. Well, I told the priest, and he gave me the name and address of people that could help me, not thinking in a million years that I would be sent back to Ireland, where I escaped from 4 months previous. Little did I think what was ahead of me then. I had no idea that I was coming to a place of horror, complete horror. I arrived, I went in, I remember going into the front entrance and into the hall, what was like a foyer, and then into another little room where I was stripped, with 2 nuns looking on, observing what I was taking off, taking every single, even little studded earrings you could hardly see, was taken from me. Everything, my shoes, everything. And given this canvas type dress and sort of clog shoes. That we arrived in the morning, August morning. It was a foggy, wet, damp morning by boat, and we went in, and that night I only arrived, me and another girl, a lovely girl. She was a Kerry girl, 4 months younger than I was. We were put in charge of the labour ward. I wasn't aware of the facts of life. I didn't even know where a baby came from, and yet we were put in charge of the labour ward, where we answered night call to the girls. All we could do was to pacify the girl, this frightened, beautiful, beautiful Irish girl, frightened out of her life. Why, I wonder, anyway. Went on, I had my beautiful baby, William. Sorry, I can't say anymore. But William, now we know he's buried. He would not be. I've been coming here for years, talking to him, apologizing to him, but he wasn't buried here. He's buried. We're told. I mean, when I read the report, the government inquiry, and my words to be changed, completely changed, and absolutely changed the sentence, not on my side, and I mean, and then to be insulted by a £5,000 hush money, which I called it hush money, for our babies to die. I almost died, but luckily I escaped. God, I don't know how. And it's just, I wonder why. What was it for? Why were we punished? What did we do wrong? Why? I mean, we could have looked after our babies, fed our babies, loved our babies, and if we had been given the facilities, but there were nobody. Everybody hated. It was the church who got onto the parishioners to put this hatred into their minds about single mothers. I was born myself from a single mother. You know, we weren't. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Do apologize.
Thank you. It's been an honour to listen to that, Madeleine. An honour. Thank you. Wow. You know, when we started doing this 10 years ago, when people came to the microphones first with their stories to tell, they were a little nervous because they had kept their truth within for decades, many of them. And one thing we have achieved, if we've achieved nothing else in this beautiful place on a Sunday afternoon in June, is we've come from people being nervous about talking when they come here to someone like Madeleine who's just told that story. And I think that's progress, and I think that's a win, because we can speak that. That's pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. We always try to have you done within an hour and 10 minutes as such, and even more so today because there's sunshine to be enjoyed. There's also some goodies at the Black Rock Inn if you'd care to join any of the organisers and chew the fat and maybe take a few photographs. A little bit of housekeeping again before we go. There is a toilet. It's on the way out in behind the fence. Just you'll find it. Now, the other buildings, it's important to remind you again, Bessborough is a working place these days, and there are many service users, many of them vulnerable. So we would ask, please, even though you might have memories of here and you would like to see in the window, please don't. We've been asked not to. And also, again, if any of you have been captured on film and would prefer not to be, I'm sure you can talk to the crew and they'd be happy to edit you out after. To everybody who has come, thank you. To those who are here in